In today's video, we're going to create our very first agent. This is part 8 of a 14-part series. In previous videos, we have learned how to do prompt engineering and agent management, but today we're going to begin the process of creating custom agents. Now, first of all, what exactly do we mean by a custom agent? And this is characterized by a task markdown file. And this is a file which instructs AI such as ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude to perform a task it was previously unable to do. And the first part of the task markdown file is the role. And this describes the job title the AI agent is asked to fulfill. And this defines the attributes of an exceptional performer. And the second part is the task. One must concisely and precisely define exactly what we are asking the AI agent to do. Every task and subtask is named and defined. The next is the steps, and this is how the task is going to be done, a sequence of steps, sometimes linear, sometimes not. Next is the analysis. How do we know if we can trust the output? We want to provide the human agent manager with all the details required to make a well-informed decision about a solution. And finally, one or more examples that begin with the initial data and conclude with the final solution. Okay, let's talk about these in a little more detail. So the role is the first one. We're going to mark with heading 1. I'm going to describe the title. In this case, I'm a software development engineer, as well as the attributes of an exceptional performer. And when I fill out the role section, I think back to the person I've witnessed who did a particularly good job of this role. If I would like AI to emulate any one person, what would that be? And I think about their attributes such as problem solving and communication and collaboration and continuous learning and things like that. The next section is the task. And this is exactly what we want it to perform, but usually we break a large task into subtasks and sub-subtasks and so on. Each of these definitions will be marked with bold and defined explicitly in a bulleted list. The next part is the steps, and this is the sequence of actions I'm going to perform. Step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4. And next is the analysis. How do I know if I've done a good job? And then finally, examples of particularly good output. Now, in order for us to see how this works, we're going to build an agent from scratch. We're going to create a fact check agent, and this agent will verify a given fact. Okay, so I'm going to start with Visual Studio Code, and I prefer Visual Studio Code because it allows me to preview my task markdown file. So I'm going to start with a new text file, and I'm going to immediately save as. And what am I going to save it as? I'm going to say checker. Maybe I'll call it checker. And I got to make sure my file type is a markdown. There we go. Now, as soon as I created this a markdown file, I'd like you to observe that I have this little preview icon in the corner here. And when I click that, that allows me to not only type my markdown, but also see a preview. Now, recall I'm going to have several different sections. My first one is going to be my role. My second one is going to be my task. My third is going to be my steps. My fourth is going to be my analysis. And my final one will be my examples. Okay, so now that I've created my task markdown file, I'm going to fill in the role. I'm going to start with the job title and then the attributes of a particularly good performer. So I'm going to start with my role here. Okay, so let's read that. You are a researcher. You like to get to the bottom of mysteries. It is very exciting for you to get closer and closer to a solution. When the answer is found, nothing is more rewarding. You're also very good at finding sources and verifying their authenticity. To you, an unverified source is a good clue that helps you find a trustworthy answer. In other words, you never stop with unverified sources. You are always on the lookout for something better. This brings us to your final attribute. You are tenacious. You do not stop until you get a satisfactory answer. Now, I need to emphasize that many different sets of attributes to be good here. We want to customize this agent to your specific needs. So tell me, what would be a good researcher to you? And that's what you fill out and describe here. Now that my role is finished, I'm going to do the task. So the task I'm going to start with, and this task is going to have two parts, the fact I want to verify and the report of how well I've done. The report is going to have two parts itself, a source list and a report summary. The source list is a collection of sources, and each source is going to have a source name, a source summary, and a source list. So let's define each of these in turn. Okay, so now we'll fill out the task section. All right, so your task is to verify the truthfulness of a given fact. Specifically, you are to generate a report from the fact which determines the truthfulness of the fact. In order to do this, I need to define the fact, the report, the source name, the source summary, and the source link. Now observe that each of these definitions I mark with bold by putting asterisks on either side. I have my collection of definitions in a bulleted list. Now, there's many different ways we can present this, and AI is actually fairly good at discerning your intent. However, I found when I have a custom definition, one that's specific to my task, then marking that specific definition or that sense of the word in bold clarifies it. It makes it less likely the AI is going to misinterpret my intention. I'm also very self-referential. In other words, for an example, when I defined a source, I say a source is part of the source list and it consists of a source name, a source summary, and a source link. In the source name, source summary, and source link, I then say, hey, this is part of the source. In other words, each of these definitions refer to each other, so the relationship is clear and very difficult to understand. So now that I have the task defined, I'll go through the steps. In this case, I'm going to have 6 steps. Number 1, prompt for the fact. Number 2, find sources. Number 3, create a source summary. Step 4, create a report summary. Step 5, display the report summary. And finally, display the source summary. So to complete the task, which is to generate a report from the fact, please do the following steps in order. Now notice I'm referring to the definitions I made earlier, and my terms are marked in boldface. If the fact is not provided in the prompt, ask the user for the fact to be verified, and then perform a web search to find the 10 to 20 articles or web pages pertaining to the fact. Of the found articles, place the 5 most important ones on a source list. Do not display anything on a screen at this step. For each source in the source list, determine the source name and create a source summary. Do not display anything in the article. Do not display anything on the screen at this step. And step 4, based on what we learned about the sources in the source list, generate a report summary. Step 5, display the report summary. And finally, step 6, display the source list on the screen. Okay, now that I have the steps done, I want to know if I can trust the results. And here, how do I know if I've done a good job? Well, I want to know if the sources are a good quality. And every source is going to be, in this case, a primary, a first-hand account, a secondary source written by an expert, or a preliminary source, which is unverified. So we're going to ask AI to go through each of the sources in the source list and determine if it's primary, secondary, or preliminary. We would like to know the quality of the sources in the source list. Each source can have one of 3 types. Primary, and a primary source is a source written either by the individual or organization who discovered the topic being written about, by the individual or organization who invented the topic, or by the individual or organization who personally witnessed the event. In other words, it is a first-hand account. If you're going to classify a source as primary, give a one-sentence justification of why the author qualifies. Secondary. A secondary source is a source written by an expert in the field. If you're going to qualify a source as secondary, provide a 1 to 2 sentence justifying why the author qualifies. This is performed by looking at the credentials of the author. Does the author qualify as an expert? And finally, preliminary. A preliminary source is any source that is not secondary or primary. The author may be an expert, but we can't be sure. We can only use preliminary sources when a primary or secondary source cannot be found. Create a bulleted list of each source in the source list with the quality type, primary, secondary, or preliminary, and justify why that is the case. And the last bit is to do in examples. I'm going to have a couple examples. One, a verified fact that is actually correct. One is an incorrect fact. And finally, a partially true fact. Now I'm going to save this, and what we're going to erase the example section right now, and we're going to run our task markdown file through an AI agent. Okay, I'm going to start with Gemini, and I'm going to upload my file, checker.markdown, okay? And I'm going to say, please follow the instructions in the attached file. I want to verify the following fact. And I want to pick something which is true, and that is that alpha 0 is a better Go player than any human. Now it's going to follow my instructions. Okay, so I'm going to take this result and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my editor. I'm going to say examples. One example, a valid fact. Example one, a valid fact. Okay, so I'm going to say my fact is Alpha Zero is a better Go player than any human. And then, so this is actually my prompt, my input. And then here's my report. And I'm just going to paste this in. Now, this is probably not exactly how I want it, so I'm going to go through and check it. Is verifying authenticity of the claims. I have investigated the statement AlphaGo. Based on its results, I'll give a breakdown of facts. I don't really want that. Tell me how you're going to do this kind of thing. So I'm just going to erase that. So here's my source list. I don't really want it to be heading 3. I just want it to be bold. If I select this and hit double star, it becomes bold. Source name, you know what? I'm just going to go with, I want the source name to be bold here. So I'm going to get rid of source name. And I'm just going to say master without human nature, good. And we have the summary. Okay. And we have my link. There we go. Okay, that's the format I want my output to be in. Okay. And a report summary. Remember, I asked for the report summary on top. So I don't want it here. That's silly. So now I'm going to cut this up here and put it on top. And sure, that's a good answer. Okay, let's take a look at this. Primary looks good. Primary looks good. Secondary. Wikipedia is not secondary. What is Wikipedia? That's a preliminary. And it is not because it is a third-party compilation results. There is no expert commentary. We don't know who wrote this. So I'm going to correct this by saying that all Pedia articles are preliminary. Okay, so now I've created an example. So now I think the next time I run this is going to be a little bit more accurate. And we're going to continue to refine this with a few more examples until finally I got it exactly the format that I want. Now I need to emphasize something. When we go through the examples, you got to put in the format that you specifically care about. This agent is made for you and no one else, right? And so as we understand better how we want to consume information, then we want to make the report reflect that preference. Okay, that's all there is to creating a custom agent. Now it's time for you to create one.